Folks, gather round because the story I'm about to tell you, it's one that the dust of the Old West tried to bury. It's a story about lines drawn in the sand and the kind of love that dares to cross them. It starts in a town called Silver Creek, a place so dry and brittle you'd think the whole town could snap in half with a strong gust of wind. And in that town lived a young woman named Clara Whitlow. She was 22 years old with eyes the color of new spring leaves and hair like spun desert sand. But don't let that fool you. Clara had a spine made of ironwood. She had to. Clara! Her mother's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. You stay clear of Miller's fence, you hear? They seen Apache moving through Skeleton Pass again. It was the same warning she got every day. Apache. The word was a curse in Silver Creek, a boogeyman to scare children and a reason for the men at the saloon to oil their guns. The stories they told were wild things, tales of phantom warriors who moved like smoke and showed no mercy. Yes, Mama, Clara said, but her eyes were already drifting to the distant mesas, where the world felt big and free. She had a basket of herbs on her arm for Doc Hartley, the town's only doctor. His cabin sat on the very edge of town, right up against the invisible line that separated their world from the one everyone feared. Most folks wouldn't go near it, but Clara wasn't most folks. She walked out of town, the sun blazing down, turning the desert into a sea of gold. The giant saguaro cacti stood like silent watchers, their arms raised to the sky. This was Clara's real church. Out here she could breathe. The town felt like a cage of fear, of small minds, of men who looked at her like she was a prize mare to be bought and bred. Today, something pulled her further than usual. A flicker of impossible blue. Mountain bluebirds. They were rare this far down from the peaks, their wings like tiny scraps of fallen sky. They flitted into a narrow canyon she'd never dared to explore before, and without a second thought, she followed. The canyon walls rose up around her, the red rock glowing in the sun. It was quiet, too quiet. The bluebird's song, which had echoed off the stone, suddenly vanished. The silence that fell was heavy. It had weight. Her hand went to the small knife on her belt, the last thing her father had given her. The canyon no longer felt like a wonder. It felt like a trap. A single pebble clattered down from the ledge above her. She spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The canyon was empty, but she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone. She was not alone. Someone was watching her. I mean no harm, she called out, her voice sounding small and fragile against the ancient stone. I'm just gathering herbs for the doctor. Silence. Then a shadow shifted on the canyon wall ahead of her. Another moved behind her. They had her surrounded. The stories flooded her mind. The brutal tales told in hushed, fearful whispers at the general store. Apache warriors who could track a man across a bare rock, who showed no mercy to settlers trespassing on their land. Please, she whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. I'll leave. A figure dropped from the rocks in front of her. He landed without a sound, as graceful and silent as a mountain cat. Clara's breath hitched in her throat. He was younger than the monsters in the stories, maybe 30. He was lean and powerful, with hair as black as a starless night held back by a simple red cloth. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were dark and deep, and they held an intelligence that made the town's caricature of the savage Indian seem like a child's foolish drawing. He wasn't a monster. He was a man, and that was somehow even more terrifying. His hand rested on the hilt of his own knife. He studied her, his gaze intense, unblinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was like the rumble of a distant storm. You are lost, white woman. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Clara, finding a spark of her father's defiance, lifted her chin. I followed the birds. A flicker of something, surprise, amusement, danced in his dark eyes. The birds lead many to their death. Then why haven't you killed me? The question was out before she could stop it. It was bold. It was reckless. It was so very Clara. He seemed taken aback. He tilted his head, reassessing her. This wasn't the screaming, fainting woman he'd expected. This one stood her ground, meeting his gaze head on. He nodded toward her basket. You carry medicine plants, he observed. You are a healer. I gather them for the doctor, she clarified. Then she did something crazy. She took a step toward him. Do you know these plants? The healing ones. His expression hardened slightly. My people knew them before your people knew this land existed. The truth of it stung, but she nodded. I believe that. I wish... She stopped herself. What was she thinking? You wish what? He pressed. I wish I could learn the right way, she admitted, the words tumbling out. The books from back east. They don't understand this land. They try to force its secrets instead of listening to them. Now she was certain. It was surprise in his eyes. He moved closer, and every instinct she had screamed at her to run. He smelled of sage and wind and wild open spaces. You should not be here, he said, his voice low. These canyons are forbidden to your kind. My kind? Her father's temper flared inside her. You don't know the first thing about my kind. I know enough, he shot back, the softness gone. I know your town shoots my people on sight. I know your men ride through our camps and look at our children as if they are livestock to be counted before slaughter. The air crackled between them. He was right. She couldn't deny it. Not all of us, she said quietly. But I guess that doesn't matter much, does it? He stared at her for a long, heavy moment. The silence stretched, thick with 100 years of hate and misunderstanding. She could feel the eyes of his hidden warriors on her, could feel the tension of arrows drawn taut on bowstrings. Then he did something she never expected. He stepped aside. Follow your tracks back, he commanded. Do not return. She walked past him, every nerve screaming, aware of his presence behind her, of the unseen eyes watching her every step. At the mouth of the canyon, she risked a glance back. He stood like a statue carved from the red rock itself. My name is Clara, she called out, not knowing why it mattered, why she needed him to know. He didn't answer. But just before she turned away, she thought she saw him give a single, almost imperceptible nod. The walk back to Silver Creek was a blur. She felt like a ghost, moving through a world that suddenly seemed flat and colorless. That night she lay in her bed, staring at the stars, unable to think of anything but dark, intelligent eyes and a voice that held both thunder and a deep, aching sadness. The man in the canyon wasn't a monster from a story. He was real, he was proud, and he had every reason to hate her. So why did he let her go? That question haunted her dreams. A door had been opened in that canyon, and she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she couldn't close it. She had crossed a line, and she knew deep in her soul she was going to cross it again. But what Clara didn't know was that the man in the canyon, whose name was Takakota, was just as puzzled by her. He'd shown mercy, a thing he could rarely afford, and he couldn't get the image of her defiant green eyes out of his head. The next day he found her tracks. She had come back. Anger flared in his chest. The foolish white woman was defying his warning. He followed her trail, his movements silent, ready to end this foolishness for good. He found her in a hidden place, a canyon where sacred springs pooled among the rocks, a place his people called too holy, where water rises. Yet a place forbidden. She was kneeling by the water, humming a soft tune, carefully harvesting watercress. She wasn't plundering the plants. She was tending to them, taking some but leaving most, just as his grandmother had taught him. A small lizard skittered past and she laughed, a sound like bells. Good morning to you too, she said to the tiny creature. Takakota watched from the rocks above, his anger melting into a strange confusion. This woman, she didn't belong in his world, but she seemed to understand it better than the people she came from. She looked up then and saw him. She didn't scream. She just went still, her chin lifting in that familiar, stubborn way. I suppose you're going to tell me this place is forbidden too, she called up. He dropped down from the ledge, landing softly in front of her. All of this land is forbidden to you, he said, and yet you are still alive. That must frustrate you. The words were meant to be a jab, but her reply disarmed him completely. No, she said, her cheeks flushing. I'm sorry. I was trying to be brave, and it came out stupid. Her honesty was a strange and powerful thing. He found himself asking her why she kept coming back. Because they're wrong, she said, her voice filled with passion. The medicines they sell in the store, they don't work right. This land has its own healing, its own secrets. But nobody in my town wants to listen. They just want to tame it. She looked him straight in the eye. I want to listen. Over the next hour, he found himself doing the unthinkable. He started teaching her. He showed her which plants were bitter, which were sweet, how to thank the earth for its gifts. She was a quick learner, her eyes wide with a genuine hunger for knowledge. She asked about his grandmother. She walks with the spirits now, he said, his voice tight. She died rather than be caged on the reservation. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. Your people's sorrow changes nothing. The words were harsh, but she didn't flinch. No, she agreed quietly. It doesn't. When the sun was high, he told her she had to go. But as she turned to leave, she paused. Will you be here tomorrow? He knew he should say no. He knew he should forbid her from ever returning. He knew that what he was doing was dangerous, a betrayal of his people's trust. But he didn't say no. He just looked at her, and in his silence, she found her answer. She gave him a quick, bright smile that felt like the sun breaking through clouds, and then she was gone. Takakota watched her go, a stone of conflict sitting heavy in his chest. His younger brother, Kuruk, a warrior whose heart was hardened by hate, would kill him if he knew. This woman was a bridge between two worlds that were at war, and walking across a bridge in a war zone is how you get killed. He knew he should report her to the elders. He knew his duty, but for the first time in his life, Takakota considered ignoring it. This woman, with her gentle hands and defiant eyes, was more dangerous than a whole company of soldiers, because a soldier you could fight. But how do you fight a feeling you've never had before? How do you fight hope? The secret meetings continued for months. Through the blistering heat of summer and into the cool whisper of autumn, they met in the hidden canyon. It was their own private world, a fragile truce in the middle of a war. Takakota taught her the language of the desert, and Clara in turn told him about her world, of books and strange cities back east. She learned his real name was Takakota. She learned about his brother Kuruk, who led the young warriors and whose hatred for the white settlers was a living fire. Kuruk's anger was righteous. Their father had been killed by soldiers during a so-called peace talk, shot down without provocation. Clara felt the shame of it, the inherited guilt. I'm so sorry, was all she could offer. Sorrow doesn't bring back the dead, Takakota said, but the bitterness in his voice was softer now when he spoke to her. One night, under a full moon that washed the desert in silver, she brought him a gift, a pouch of ceremonial tobacco, the kind she'd read about in her father's old journal. Her father, another mystery, a surveyor who wrote about the desert with the love of a poet. He died of influenza 3 years back, leaving Clara feeling like the only person who truly understood her was gone. Takakota accepted the gift, his fingers brushing hers. The touch was electric, a spark in the cool night air. Why do you do this? He asked, his voice rough. Risk everything for what? He looked at her, and the carefully constructed walls around his heart seemed to crumble. For conversations with a woman who speaks to lizards? For the way you say our words like they are precious things? The space between them hummed with unspoken feelings. I don't know, she whispered, her own heart aching with a beautiful, terrible emotion. I just know that when I'm in town, I feel like I'm suffocating. And when I'm here with you, I can breathe. He reached into his own pack and pulled out a small object wrapped in deerskin. He placed it in her palm. She unwrapped it carefully. It was a piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a bird in flight, a mountain bluebird, just like the ones that had led her to him. It's beautiful, she breathed. Our elders say such birds carry messages between worlds, he said softly. They guide those who have work to do. Bridge building, understanding. He paused. It also means protection. Keep it hidden. She closed her fingers around the carving, its warmth seeping into her skin. She understood the meaning of the gift. This was more than friendship. This was something deeper, something dangerous and impossible. And yet, it felt more real than anything in her life. Takakota, she began. not knowing what to say. His hand covered hers just for a moment. Strong, calloused, real. "I know all the reasons this is impossible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The blood between our peoples. The war that is coming. I know. But when you are here, something in my chest feels lighter. And when you leave, the desert seems empty." He shook his head as if angry with himself. "I am a fool." "Then we're fools together," she whispered. The admission hung in the air, fragile and terrifying and true. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, and they both knew it. One wrong step, and they would both fall. But as she looked at him, at this man who was supposed to be her enemy, she realized she was already falling, and she didn't want to be caught. But what neither of them knew was that they were being watched. Not by Apache warriors, not by soldiers, by someone from Silver Creek. And the trouble they feared was closer than they could ever imagine. A storm was coming, and their secret canyon was about to become the heart of it. The first sign of that storm came from her own family. Her brother Samuel, a young man who thought his father's death made him the man of the house, cornered her by the chicken coop. "People are talking, Clara," he warned, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "They say you've been walking out toward the Forbidden Canyons. You remember what happened to the Carlson girl, don't you?" Clara's stomach clenched. Everyone knew about Emma Carlson. She'd fallen for a Mexican trader. Her father and brothers caught them trying to elope. The trader was found dead a week later, and Emma just stared at walls now, a ghost in her own home. Clara brushed off his warning, but a cold fear took root in her heart. The cage was closing in. A few days later, the real trouble arrived. Colonel Mitchell and a dozen soldiers rode into town, their blue uniforms a stark omen against the dusty streets. "Apache raiders hit the Collins Ranch," the colonel announced to the gathered townsfolk. "Burned the barn, stole horses. We tracked them to the northern canyons." The northern canyons, Takakota's territory. A man named Jake Morrison, whose voice was always the loudest when calling for blood, shouted, "Time we cleared out that nest of vipers." The crowd roared in agreement. The colonel announced a volunteer posse would ride at dawn. Clara watched in horror as Samuel, her own brother, stepped forward, his chest puffed out with ignorant pride. She had to warn Takakota. But how? The whole town was watching. Samuel's eyes were always on her now. Help came from the most unexpected place. Doc Hartley. "Clara," the old doctor said, his voice low as he stood beside her, "I need a fresh supply of willow bark from the eastern springs, before the first snow hits." The eastern springs were in the opposite direction of the northern canyons, but the long route to them, it passed by Skeleton Pass, a perfect place to send a signal. She looked at him, and for a moment, she saw a deep understanding in his weathered eyes. He knew, or at least, he suspected. "Take the long route," he added, his meaning clear. "Sometimes the plants grow stronger in difficult places." She rode like the devil was on her heels. At the pass, she built a small fire with green wood, just as Takakota had taught her, sending up a smoke signal that spelled out the pattern for danger. "Soldiers, flee." She prayed someone would see it. She was gathering the willow bark, making her alibi real, when the sound of hoofbeats thundered behind her. It wasn't soldiers. It was worse. 4 Apache warriors surrounded her, and the one who dismounted and stalked toward her, his face a mask of cold fury, was Kuruk, Takakota's brother. She knew him instantly from Takakota's descriptions. He had the same strong features, but where Takakota's held thoughtfulness, Kuruk's were twisted with hate. "So," he spat, his English accented and sharp, "you are the white woman who corrupts my brother." "I came to warn you," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Soldiers are coming." "We saw your smoke," he sneered, "just as we have seen you sneaking to meet him, like a coyote in the night. Do you know what we do to spies?" His hand went to his knife. "I'm not a spy." "Kuruk!" Takakota's voice cut through the air like a whip. He emerged from the rocks, placing himself between Clara and his brother. The two brothers faced off, arguing in their own tongue, the words flying like stones. Finally, Kuruk turned back to Takakota, but spoke in English, for her to hear. "You choose her over your people. I choose to listen to her warning over your blind pride." Takakota shot back. This could be a trap, Kuruk insisted. She seeks to save only you, her little Apache pet. The insult hung in the air, ugly and sharp, but the confrontation was cut short. Kuruk saw something, his eyes sharp as a hawk's fixed on her hand, which had instinctively gone to her pocket, to the turquoise bird. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into slits of pure venom. You gave her grandmother's carving, he whispered, his voice shaking with a rage that was terrifying to behold. He looked at his brother as if he were a stranger. You are lost, he turned to Clara. Your warning may save our women and children tonight, but this foolishness between you and my brother will be the death of him. When the soldiers come, remember you chose this. He and his warriors mounted up and vanished into the rocks, leaving Clara and Takakota alone in the sudden, heavy silence. This has to end, Takakota said, the words sounding like they were torn from his soul. He wouldn't look at her. Soon there will be no safe places, no room for us. He finally turned, and the pain in his eyes was a physical blow. I would not see you caught in the crossfire. And I would not see you hunted, she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Then we must be what we are, he said, his voice ragged. Apache and white, enemies. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, a gesture of farewell that broke her heart. Go home, Clara. Bar your door, and whatever comes, know that you showed me a bridge could be built. Perhaps not in our time, but someday. Then like a ghost, he was gone. She rode home through the dark, a cold dread seeping into her bones. She had tried to help, but all she had done was drive a wedge between two brothers and put a target on the back of the man she couldn't even say the word in her own mind. It was too impossible, too painful. When she got back to town, it was in chaos. The colonel had moved up the attack. They were riding out tonight. Clara watched her brother, Samuel, oiling his rifle with eager, trembling hands. He was going to hunt men. He was going to hunt Takakota, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. Or was there? She thought about her father. He was a surveyor, a man of maps and lines. But his journal wasn't just full of charts. It was full of sketches of Apache symbols, notes on their language, and entries about trading with a small band in the northern canyons. One entry, written just a week before he died, was circled in red ink. It spoke of a secret, a promise he had made, and a map to a place he called the Valley of Whispering Stone. Clara had always thought it was just a name he'd made up, but now she wasn't so sure. What if it was real? What if her father hadn't just been a surveyor? What if he was involved in something much, much deeper? She raced to her room, her heart pounding. She pulled out the loose floorboard where she kept her father's journal. She flipped to the last page. There was a map crudely drawn of the Canyonlands, and in the corner a symbol was sketched, a bluebird in flight, the same symbol as the carving Takakota had given her. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. Her father hadn't just met the Apache. He was connected to them, connected to Takakota's family, and then she saw the final chilling entry in the journal. It wasn't about influenza. It was about a meeting with men from Silver Creek, men who wanted his maps. The entry ended abruptly. They know about the silver. Watson is getting greedy. I will not betray my promise. Watson? Sheriff Watson. The influenza hadn't killed her father. The dates matched perfectly. Her father had been murdered by men from her own town. And Sheriff Watson, the man leading the posse, was behind it all. This wasn't about stolen horses. This was about silencing anyone who knew the truth. This was about greed. This was about extermination. Samuel wasn't just a misguided boy. He was a pawn in a murderer's game. Clara's grief and fear forged into something new, something hard and sharp. Rage. She grabbed the journal, saddled her mare in the darkness, and rode like a fury out of town. She wasn't just warning Takakota anymore. She was choosing a side. She rode straight for the canyon, for the signal point, hoping she wasn't too late. She built her fire, her hands shaking, and sent up the smoke. This time the signal was different. It was the one for an ambush, a trap. She didn't have to wait long, but it wasn't Takakota who found her. It was Kuruk. He seized her from behind, his knife at her throat. You lead them to us, he hissed. Takakota appeared then, his face grim. Let her go, brother. She is the bait in their trap. They're coming, Clara gasped, trying to explain. Sheriff Watson, he killed my father. It's not about horses, it's about a silver mine on your land. My father knew, and he wouldn't tell them where it was. The brothers stared at her, then at each other. The story was wild, unbelievable. And then they heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats and English voices. Shouts echoed from the canyon rim. There they are, get 'em! Gunshots erupted. The night exploded into chaos. Blue-coated soldiers appeared on the ridges, rifles flashing in the dark. They hadn't followed her. They had been led here. And the man at the front, pointing down at them, was her brother, Samuel. He hadn't just been suspicious. He had been a spy. He had been watching her meetings with Takakota for weeks, reporting everything back to Sheriff Watson. Her love had been used as a weapon against her. The betrayal was so absolute it stole her breath. In the ensuing firefight, Takakota shielded her, pushing her behind a boulder. He was hit, a bullet grazing his arm. Can you ride? He grunted, the pain clear on his face. He whistled and his horse appeared through the smoke. He lifted her onto its back. Go, he commanded. There's an old mine shaft 2 miles north. Hide there. I will find you. He slapped the horse's flank, and it bolted into the darkness. Clara clung to its mane, the sounds of war cries and gunfire fading behind her. She had lost everything, her family, her home, and now she might have just lost him too. She found the abandoned mine shaft, a dark wound in the side of the mountain. She huddled inside, listening to the battle rage in the distance, each gunshot a new tear in her heart. Hours passed. The sounds of fighting died down. Was he alive? Had they been captured? Killed? Just as the first hint of dawn painted the sky, a figure stumbled into the entrance of the mine. It was Takakota. He was bloodied and exhausted, his shirt torn, but he was alive. He collapsed beside her. My brother, he lives, he managed to say. Your warning, it gave them enough time to get the women and children away. Only the warriors remained to fight. He closed his eyes. But we lost 3 men. The weight of those deaths settled on her. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I thought I was being careful. It was not you, he said, his voice heavy. It was Samuel. He followed you from the beginning. He told Watson everything. The final piece clicked into place. The full, ugly truth. Her own brother had sent her to her death, had used her to lead an attack on people he knew she cared for. They think you are dead, Takakota said, his voice quiet. Samuel saw you go down in the crossfire. They all think the Apache killed you. He looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. So now you have a choice. You can go back. Tell them you were held captive, that you escaped. They will believe you. Your life can go back to what it was. He took a breath. Or, you come with me. My people are fleeing south to Mexico. It will be a hard life. They will not trust you, but he didn't have to finish the sentence. But we will be together. Clara looked at this man, wounded and hunted, his world shattered, yet still offering her a place in it. She thought of Silver Creek, of her brother's treachery, of Sheriff Watson's murderous greed. That wasn't her home anymore. It was a town built on lies and blood. She pulled the turquoise bird from her pocket. It felt warm in her hand. My father died protecting your secret, she said, her voice shaking but clear. He chose you. Now, I'm choosing you. A look of profound relief washed over his face. Then, despite the pain, the loss, the impossible future ahead of them, he smiled. He pulled her into his arms, and in that dark, cold mine shaft, Clara finally felt warm. She had no home, no family, nothing but the clothes on her back and the man holding her. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The journey south was a nightmare. They moved by night, hiding by day, always looking over their shoulders. Takakota's people, what was left of them, treated Clara with a mixture of suspicion and outright hostility. To them, she was the white woman who had brought the soldiers down on them. Only Kuruk, strangely, was silent. He watched her, his eyes unreadable. but the venom was gone. He had seen her in the firefight. He had seen Takakota shield her. He had seen her brother betray her. He was a man who understood war and loyalty, and he seemed to be reserving judgment. One night the elders held a council. They were trapped. Soldiers blocked the passes to the south. Their old hunting grounds were crawling with patrols. They were running out of food, out of time, out of hope, and their anger needed a target. All eyes turned to Clara. "She is a curse," one of the warriors said. "Since she came among us, we have known nothing but death and retreat." "She warned us," Takakota argued, his voice fierce. "She saved the lives of our children." "And how did she know to warn us?" Another elder countered. "Perhaps she is a spy of the deepest sort, earning our trust only to lead us into a final, perfect trap." The accusation was absurd, but in their fear and desperation, it found fertile ground. Before Takakota could argue further, the oldest of the elders, a man named Crow Feather, whose eyes were clouded with age but whose spirit was sharp as flint, spoke. "There is one way to know the truth of a heart," he said, his voice raspy. "The old way. Let the desert judge her. The trial of survival." A hush fell over the camp. The trial was a legend, a brutal ordeal from a harder time. The accused was sent into the barren wilderness for 3 days and 3 nights, with no food, no water, no knife. If they were true of heart, the spirits of the land would guide them to survive. If they were false, the desert would claim them. No one had been put to the trial in generations. "No," Takakota said instantly. "She is not one of us. She does not know the ways." "Then she will die," Kuruk said flatly. But there was no satisfaction in his voice. Before anyone else could speak, Clara stood up. "I'll do it." All eyes turned to her. She saw shock on their faces, disbelief, and in a few, a flicker of something new, respect. "Clara, you don't understand," Takakota pleaded, his eyes filled with terror for her. "I understand perfectly," she said, her voice steady. "I will never be one of you until the shadow is gone. I will not have you risk your life to defend me every day. Let me do this. Let the land decide." At dawn, they took her to a vast, empty plain. They took her boots, her dress, leaving her in a simple shift. They took everything except for the one thing Takakota pressed into her hand when no one was looking, the turquoise bird. "Walk until you can no longer see us," Crowfeather instructed, "and listen to what the desert has to teach you." She gave Takakota one last look, memorizing his face. Then she turned and walked away from the only safety she had left in the world, into the deadly, beautiful emptiness. The first day was a lesson in fire. The sun was a merciless hammer, the sand a skillet. By noon she was dizzy with thirst. She remembered Takakota's lessons. Look for where the green things grow. Water is life. She followed a line of pale green creosote bushes until she found it, a small shaded crack in some rocks, where a trickle of precious water seeped out. She drank, and it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. The first night was a lesson in ice. The temperature plummeted. She huddled in a shallow ditch, pulling sand and rocks over herself for warmth, shivering violently, thinking of Takakota's arms. The second day, hunger gnawed at her. She found the bulbous red fruit of a prickly pear cactus. She used a sharp rock to knock one down and carefully scraped off the needles, just as she'd seen the Apache women do. The fruit was sweet and filled with water. It was enough. She was learning. The desert wasn't empty. It was full of secrets, full of life. If you just knew how to look, how to listen. She felt her old self, the timid girl from Silver Creek, burning away under the relentless sun. In her place, someone tougher, quieter, and more alive was being forged. On the morning of the third day, she was making her way back, following the sun, her bare feet now tough as leather. She was weak, burned, and scratched, but she was alive. She had passed the test, and that's when she heard the gunshots. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through her exhaustion. She ran. She followed the sound, her heart pounding a rhythm of dread. She crested a ridge and looked down, and her world ended for the second time. The camp was under attack. Soldiers. They had found the band's hiding place, and leading them Pointing out the warriors' positions was Sheriff Watson. Beside him, looking pale but resolute, was her brother Samuel. They hadn't given up the hunt. They had tracked them. The Apache were pinned down, fighting a losing battle. She saw Takakota and Kuruk fighting back to back, a desperate last stand. She saw women and children huddled behind rocks. It was a massacre waiting to happen. A child screamed as a bullet ricocheted nearby, and something inside Clara snapped. These were her people. The desert had told her so. She moved not like Clara Whitlow, but like a predator. She circled the battle, unseen, a ghost in the landscape she now understood. She saw the soldiers' horses, tied and lightly guarded at the bottom of the ridge. An idea, insane and desperate, took hold. She moved like smoke. She took out the two guards with a brutal efficiency that would have terrified her old self. Then she stood before the nervous horses, speaking to them in the low, calm tones Takakota used. She pulled the pin on a saddlebag, letting supplies spill out, spooking them further. Then with a wild cry that was torn from the very depths of her soul, she fired a guard's pistol into the air. The herd stampeded. It was chaos. Horses charged directly through the soldiers' lines, trampling equipment, scattering men. In that moment of confusion, the Apache warriors surged forward, turning the tide. But Samuel had seen her. His face went white with shock, then contorted in rage. He raised his rifle, aiming it at his own sister. A lifetime passed in that second. She stared down the barrel of her brother's gun. Before he could fire, a shape launched itself at him from the side. It was Kuruk. He tackled Samuel to the ground, his knife flashing. "No!" Clara screamed, running toward them. Kuruk had Samuel pinned, the blade at his throat. He looked up at Clara, his face a mask of battle fury and old hatred. "He is your blood," he snarled. "As these," he gestured to the Apache families, "are mine. Choose." Takakota arrived, his eyes full of anguish. Clara looked down at her brother's terrified face. Then she looked at Takakota, at Kuruk, at the people who had taken her in. The choice had already been made, days ago, in the desert. She knelt and gently placed her hand on Kuruk's arm. "We are not murderers," she said softly, her voice carrying a new authority. "We are survivors. Let him go." Kuruk stared at her, then at his brother. Takakota gave a slight nod. With a growl of frustration, Kuruk pulled his knife away. They took Samuel's weapons and sent him walking back toward his world. But before he left, Clara spoke to him. "Tell them Clara Whitlow died in the desert," she said, her voice cold and clear. "A woman named Walking Rain lives here now, and she stands with the Apache." That was the name the desert had given her, Walking Rain. As her brother stumbled away, defeated and broken, Crow Feather approached her. He placed a hand on her shoulder. His old clouded eyes seemed to see right into her soul. "The desert has spoken," he said. "You survived, you returned, and you fought for us. Welcome home, daughter." The word daughter broke through the last of her defenses. Tears streamed down her face, washing away the dust and the pain. That night, they didn't celebrate a victory. They mourned their dead and prepared to flee again, deeper into the mountains where the soldiers wouldn't follow. But as they packed, Kuruk came to her. He held out his hand. In it was a necklace of finely beaded leather. "My grandmother made this," he said gruffly, "for a warrior's wife. My brother, he chose well." It was the apology she never thought she'd get. It was acceptance. Later, sitting by the fire, Takakota wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled her close. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just held her, as if he could pour all of his love, his relief, his pride, into that one embrace. "Walking Rain," he finally whispered, testing her new name on his tongue. "It suits you." "I found my people," she whispered back, leaning her head against his chest. "I found my home." "No," he said, tilting her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "We are your home." And he kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of desperation or farewell. It was a kiss of beginning, a promise made in the firelight, witnessed by the silent, watching mountains. Their journey was far from over. A life of running and hiding lay ahead. But for the first time, Clara, Walking Rain, wasn't afraid. She had faced death and betrayal, and the fury of the desert itself. She had found her strength, her name, her family. She had found the truth, and the truth was love. A love that was wild and dangerous and worth fighting for. A love that had crossed impossible lines and forged a new world in the ashes of the old one. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. The story of Clara and Takakota is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are found when we have the courage to walk off the beaten path. What did you think of Clara's transformation into Walking Rain? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next tale from the heart of the Old West. We've got plenty more stories of courage, survival, and impossible love coming your way. Until next time, stay brave and keep exploring.